Hey, Native TikTok. I wanted to take a moment real quick and talk about something that has really been on my mind heavily the last few days. With everything that's going on with, this statement that was made previous about having to identify as white if you are white passing and indigenous or lighter skinned and indigenous, which is completely false, by the way. That no matter how much milk you put in your tea, it's still tea and indigenous is indigenous. That we take a moment to understand that this doesn't just work with lighter complected indigenous people. Something that I've grown to understand and accept is that we have just as bad, if not worse of a problem, recognizing and appreciating and uplifting some of our most powerful voices. And that would be our Afro-Indigenous brothers and sisters. And what people don't know is that some of the biggest disenrollment and identity stripping experiences that we have as indigenous people have been from our Afro-Indigenous relatives. One of the many stories that we have about this come from 1979. In particular, the Muskogee Creek Nation. After the end of the Civil War, African Americans were freed from slavery. And as such, they were allowed to become tribal citizens of indigenous nations. One of those was the Muskogee Creek. However, as we all know, just because slavery was abolished in America does not mean that racism was ended and that segregation was still very much a thing. As a result, people were put onto two separate census rolls within the tribal nation. The first roll, which went off of blood quantum, which we all know is the colonial standard anyway. But the second one was labeled freedmen, Afro-Indigenous people. And back in 1979, when they enforced the blood quantum rule, it was decided that the second census roll did not meet the requirement, and therefore were completely disenrolled, stripped, and no longer considered indigenous people. It was stolen from them. And unfortunately, a lot of indigenous people continue to have this perspective. People may not like it, but it's the absolute truth. And while we're having this conversation, it's important that we do not overshadow this perspective and acknowledge this history. So indigenous is indigenous. And that works across all spectrums. So what I'm asking all you guys is to take a moment, acknowledge that, learn, and also tag your favorite Afro-Indigenous creator in the comments. And let us truly bring all of our lost children back home.